Hello, and welcome to this webinar on data migration strategies to Aras PLM. My name is Mark Young, and I'm with XLM Solutions. Quick overview of XLM Solutions. We are a full PLM solution provider, and we provide services and solutions in a number of PDM and PLM solutions, such as Aras, SolidWorks PDM and Manage, and the Dassault system, PLM systems such as Innovia and 3D Experience. We've been around since 2005, so we've been going on our 16th year in business. We really are highly respected in the PLM industry for both our business and technical expertise, and can provide tons of references both at customers, PLM vendors, partners, etc. We are a Aras strategic partner, and we really dedicate ourselves to quality and excellence. We're always staying up to date on the latest technologies, best practices within the industry trends, etc. And today we're going to be talking about data migrations, but we really provide all aspects of PDM, PLM implementations, everything from discovery workshops, general implementations, customizations, integrations, data migrations like we're talking about, and training and support. So when customers come up to situations where they need to load data into Aras, many people would see that loading or migrating data into Aras can be a daunting task, but with proper planning and testing, this process can go smoothly. And today we'll talk about different strategies to ease the migration pain. So we'll go over, break this presentation to three main sections. We'll talk about pre-migration data analysis, talk about data cleanups, different data formats, different data loading rules, possible migration cost and estimate times for doing the migration. We'll then talk about different methods to load data into Aras. And then finally, we'll talk about the actual execution. Running the migration, testing the migration process, verifying your data, planning for that production data load, and then conducting the final production data load. So when we're analyzing the data to be loaded, I like to break that analysis up into four main buckets or four main areas to look at. So the first one is determining where that legacy data is coming from. And is it coming from a external system, a legacy PDM system? Is it coming from folders and files on your network? Is it coming from an old database like Lotus Notes? Is it coming from an ERP system, a homegrown system? It could be coming in obviously many different formats, but usually there's files, whether on the network or in some type of vaulting system, and then a database behind the data or metadata behind the data. So really get a good understanding where that data is coming from. And then understand what type of data is being managed. Is it CAD data that has external links? Is it purely metadata, which is this, metadata like part number, revision description? Is it what I consider flat files like Office files or PDF files? So really get a good understanding of what type of data you're dealing with. In addition to that, you want to move on to what I would say is the next bucket is, now you know what type of data you're dealing with. Can you get access to that raw data? Will you be able to extract that data into a format you can use it? So can you get access to it? If not, maybe you need to involve a third party or bring in additional experts to help you get access to the data. Is all the data there? Do some due diligence to make sure the data is there and there's not any missing data, or if there is missing data, how do we want to handle or deal with that? Then we talk about the mapping rules. How will that data get mapped to Aras? So, what type of properties will get mapped to the various Aras item types? How will states, if there are states being managed in the legacy system, get mapped over? How will revisions get mapped over? In Aras, you set up a standard revision revision scheme, And if your legacy data doesn't meet that revision scheme, how do you want to handle it? Aras item type mappings, how will that be done? And then is there any other links or relationships that we need to discuss, or any other special logic that we need to handle? Do we need to transform the data, i.e. maybe from numeric revisions to alpha revisions? And then finally at this time, we want to get an understanding of what can be the downtime, how can that cutover happen, where we shut off the legacy system and then go live at Aras. Normally that's done over a weekend, but can that be done over a weekend? Do you think we'll need more time to do it, less time, etc.? So we really should, even though we're not ready to do it yet, but we should discuss kind of how that final cutover should look like at a high level. With data migration, there's always some types of data cleanups that's required. So old data, I would say, gets accumulated over years. You might have hundreds of thousands of records, and there could be issues with a small majority of it. Hopefully it's not a large majority. So you should look into various data integrity issues. These are common ones. Might be having duplicate part numbers, two different records in the database, but they both represent the same part. Duplicate file names. Maybe you have 10 files you're migrating, all called washer 1. Are they indeed the same washer, or do they represent different washers? Duplicate files with different names. Maybe you have washer 1, washer 2, washer 3, but they all are the same washer in and of itself. So why load duplicate files where it's actually the same file, it's just a different file name? Are you missing or have incorrect file attributes? A lot of the key attributes are part number, revision, description. Are all those key attributes valid? If we're dealing with CAD or relationships, are all the relationships and links between the data in place? Or could you have a drawing that's missing its link to its models, or an assembly that's missing its link to its children parts or subassemblies? Could you have invalid revisions? Could you have certain attributes that need to be mandatory in Aras but may be missing in the source system where the data is coming from? So these are all different areas that you can look at. We have different utilities that can help analyze that, help develop reports. And sometimes based on the bad data, we can fix the data automatically, or sometimes you need manual intervention to fix the data. But half the battle is just reporting on it, understanding where we stand, how the data looks, and then from there we can figure out how to best clean it up. Also should be understanding that when you do a migration project, you really, are migrating to a new system, and your legacy system, whatever it is going to behave differently than how Aras works and behaves. So we don't necessarily want to just reinvent the legacy system to work and behave in Aras like it behaved in the legacy system. We want to make sure that we, take best practices of how Aras is designed and meant to be used, and incorporate that in how we're going to load our legacy data into Aras. So we really should get a good understanding of Aras and look at different areas such as file access, security, how searches can be done, permissions, what type of permissions are on the legacy data and should be placed in the production system. Any licensing implications, if based on what Aras licenses you have, whether it's CAD integration licenses or the full-blown Aras license or something else, will that affect how we design the Aras system and load data into it? The different metadata that's being managed in the legacy system versus what's Aras. Do we need to migrate every field over from the legacy system, or maybe there's this data in there that doesn't need to be migrated, or there's preset fields in Aras that will accomplish what some legacy fields in the system may have. Workflows, how workflows behave in Aras compared to the other system. And then possibly maybe it's just not a one-to-one migration. Maybe you have multiple systems that you can eliminate and do a many-to-one migration from those systems into Aras. So again, you need to understand how the different systems will interact. Can they be segregated? Can we do a migration of system 1 or system X first, and then migrate system Y, 3 months later after system X is migrated. So, understand all those different implications is very important. And along with that, it's a great time, during migration projects to really review your current business processes. Understand what's working within your business processes, what's not working, and it's a great time to update or evaluate or maybe even change those user processes and experiences to best handle your current state of doing business, and have Aras obviously configured to handle that. Where migration comes into place is doing that is usually done in parallel of the migration activities. So a simple Aras data model may be in place, but as the project goes on, as data migration goes on, you will see that the processes or the data model may change, and any changes to the data model may definitely may affect the migration process, and it should be obviously communicated to the migration team and then retested based on any changes to the data model or processes, customizations, etc. within Aras. Usually when doing Aras migrations, there's, we kind of break it up into two parts. We break it up into an extraction piece, extract from legacy system, and then a load piece, load into Aras. So regarding the extraction, whoever's doing the migration really should have familiarity with the legacy system. And in this case, most databases can be reversed engineered, and even if there isn't a lot of familiarity with the legacy system, we usually can look at that legacy database and still get access to the data. You need to make sure you can read, file data, make sure you can read properties off the files, not just fields in the database, and also links and relationships if you're dealing with any CAD data that needs to be loaded. So not only do you need to be aware of how best to read data within the database, you very may well need to be able to read property or link information coming from files, specifically dealing with CAD files. And we, just to name a few, we've done many migrations to Aras. So we've migrated from Smart Team, Innovia Matrix 1, DBWorks, Autodesk Vault, SolidWorks PDM, Meridian, Microsoft SharePoint, and more. So there's a lot of systems out there, but you gain experience in one, you can do a lot of migrations from other ones as well. So when we're doing data extractions, in many cases, we're extracting data to a neutral file format. A lot of times we use XML as a good neutral file format because that can be structured to represent links, different types of fields, different behaviors. We can also migrate it directly to a format that Aras can read. So Aras has an import tool, and that's really more of a comma or a delimited type of text file format that Aras import tool reads, so we can extract data directly to that format to load the data as well. In many cases, you may need to also, as part of the extraction, transform the data. So there's cases where we've had to, easily convert alpha revisions to numeric revisions, or in one case, we had to merge TIFF files. So there were multiple TIFF files per each sheet of a drawing, and we merged them together to represent a multi-sheet drawing, and then just loaded the one drawing with the multi-sheets versus separate TIFF files per each sheet. Data import to Aras. So the second part is, once we can extract the data, how can we import the data to Aras? So one is manual. So if you have a very small set of data, it may be just easier to manually load the data than do a, write a utility or a program to load it. Sometimes the manual operation is the best operation. Also, as mentioned, there's the Aras batch loader that comes with Aras, which is a great tool that we use a lot to load data into Aras. Though this tool, requires an Aras subscription. It gives you the ability to map fields from different columns to different fields in Aras. You can load relationships and files with the tool. And if you know the Aras AML language, it supports AML rules, and you can import or create more complex rules to loading data based on the AML query language. And then there's logging. So if you ever need to review issues, fix issues, etc., there's detailed logging from the tool as well. You could also do direct database updates. So there's areas where it may make sense to directly load data into Aras. This is very fast, but it also, requires you to understand the database structure in Aras and really know those internal fields in Aras and make sure you're setting them properly. So you really need to perform any, if you're doing a direct database update, you really need to do it at your own risk and really understand the database structure for Aras. And then there's other tools that are out there to load data. For example, we have a tool called the CycleLock Import Wizard, which lets you load data from Excel directly into Aras, and it handles metadata and links as well. And tools like this does not require Aras subscriptions, and in many cases can be even more user-friendly than the Aras batch loader tool shown as well. And then finally, I should say then there's always the ability to write your own custom program, custom tools specific to your data migration using the Aras APIs. Considerations when you're migrating data into Aras. Obviously, you want to be able to handle the different data models between the legacy system and Aras and have that good, strong mapping in place. Any migrations you do, you want to make sure you allow the end customer or yourself to grow a new Aras functionality. You never want to migrate data in such a way where you cannot expand Aras and add new functionality or modules to it. You want to make sure that any data that was migrated in Aras would appear the same way as if it was created manually through the normal Aras tools. When dealing with large data migrations, our goal is always to load any size data, and that could be 1 million records plus, over a weekend time frame or maybe a long weekend for extremely large migrations. In that case, we always recommend doing kind of what we say is a single migration or a big bang migration, where we really can load all the data at one time. And in that scenario, we shut down the legacy system on Friday, and come Monday, the users are up and running in Aras. However, there's times where, for various reasons, you can't do a big bang migration, and you might need to do delta migrations. So you definitely can handle delta migrations where a majority of the data is loaded, loaded in parallel to users still using the legacy system. And then at a certain point in time, just the deltas from the legacy system is loaded based on what was already loaded into Aras. Usually delta migrations take longer to configure, longer to test and validate. So we always recommend a single migration or a big bang migration if possible, but definitely can handle delta migrations if required. And if speed, performance is affecting your migration, definitely look at hardware as well. You can definitely get a lot of performance improvements per hardware, making sure you have SSD drives, increasing memory, optimizing your disk drives for better input-output, etc. So hardware can definitely make a difference as well. Excuse me. Some general best practices, before really, jumping into migrating data to Aras and really doing the mapping exercise, we recommend you install and test Aras out of the box so you get really familiar with the out-of-the-box functionality of Aras. As mentioned, do your due diligence, review that legacy system, determine what data to migrate, figure out the mappings and how data will be organized in Aras, identify any concerns you have and make sure you have that good cutover plan or understand what that cutover plan will look like, from the beginning. Make sure you have a test environment. You're never going to do a migration the first time it's going to be right. You're going to most likely do multiple migrations until you get it right. So make sure you have an environment where you can run those multiple migrations in. As discussed, there's many different ways we can extract data from legacy systems and load the data in Aras. So make sure you pick the best technology and develop, your best migration solution. And we definitely can help you make those decisions, make those recommendations, and do the work, of course. As mentioned, you're probably going to run 2 or 4 test cycles before you're ready for that final production migration. Make sure you do data validation. Testing is extremely important, and we believe only you, the end customer, can do the data validation. So make sure you set up time to validate your data. Obviously, you're going to plan for your production rollout and set user expectations, and then finally run that production migration. And with that, there's always a balance between downtime of users, price, the various loading tools that may be involved, number of resources involved. So we're always here to work with you and figure out that best case balance to provide the optimal data loading solution. With testing, obviously it's extremely important to test the migration process. You're going to see issues, so once you find issues, you need to fix them. And it could be legacy data issues, maybe more cleanup is needed, bad data files, broken links, bad revision schemes. To fix the issues, maybe it's manual cleanup, maybe we can change the data loading code or the rules. Maybe we need to modify Aras itself. Maybe we need to change what was defined as an integer field to be a character field to handle character data that we're trying to migrate into what was configured as an integer field. There may be bugs in the code that we need to fix. It may be procedural issues. For example, we get hung up, believe it or not, a lot of times where we load data and we need to link or associate created by or approved by usernames. Well, the key thing is to make sure those usernames already exist in the system first. So it might be a simple procedural situation, make sure users are loaded before other data. And make sure to document the migration procedure. You're going to be running this procedure. There's usually going to be multiple steps. It could be pre-migration steps, migration steps, post-migration steps, and make sure those processes are documented. And then any changes to the systems, any fixes, test again. I can't stress how important testing is. With pre-data loading planning, when probably by this time, after you run a couple test cycles, you'll understand when the legacy system will need to be turned off, or can pick a date when that will happen. You'll have a good understanding of how long it'll take to load the data, so you'll know what that downtime needs to be. And you can decide whether that will be during business hours, non-business hours, weekend, holiday, etc. You really have, again, a good document procedures at this time where you can document all your different activities, etc. Perhaps to the point where when will an email go out to tell the users that the system will be down? Who will make that legacy system read only? Who will be available to validate the data after the data is done, etc. So make sure you identify those responsible people and make sure they all know the part they'll have to play in that production migration. And then with final data loading, with proper planning and testing, the final data load should go smoothly. Make sure to follow your documented procedures. Allocate extra buffer time for any unexpected issues. And then finally, be prepared to support the users in the new system. You're going to turn on the system on Monday. There'll still be a learning curve for the Aras users, so make sure you're ready to support them. And it should be as easy as a push button at this point. So in conclusion, with proper plan and testing, migrating data to Aras can go smoothly. Make sure to pick the best migration tools, follow your documented procedures, and allocated that buffer time and support the new users. The devil's always in the details. There's as many times where we, kind of get all these mapping rules in place, start loading, and realize there's more details, more requirements that we need to handle. So make sure to fully understand your requirements, the data sets you're dealing with, limitations, technology being used, and most importantly, set the right expectations. We say a migration is never 100% successful, but there's nothing wrong with getting to 99.999, successful rate. And I'd say anything's possible. Most data migration scenarios can be accomplished in a relatively straightforward manner. There has yet to been a data migration project that we were not able to handle. So with that, thank you, and I'll open it up to any questions. So the one question that came up is, how long does data migration projects usually take? And it all depends on the amount of data, the data requirements for that data migration. I would say on average, and this is a very big average, but usually they take 3 to 4 months in calendar time from start to complete finish, but usually about 10 to 15 days in billable time to do the work. And that's, setting up the migration tools, running the tests, validating data, and then conducting that production migration. And so another question was, as part of the migration, can you convert CAD data to other formats? So yes, again, we've had many migrations where we've converted, let's say, SolidWorks drawings or Inventor drawings, almost any CAD drawing, to PDF files and loaded that PDF data as well. All right, that looks like all the questions for now. Thank you very much. My contact information is below, and I can answer any questions or additional comments you have on Aras or data migrations in general. Please reach out to me. Once again, my name is Mark Young, and thank you very much for attending.